All right, keys to the game here against Wisconsin. Let's start with the penalties. That is key number one. That's along with running the football, which I talked about a lot on yesterday's show, and I'll get to that more in just a sec. This is the number one thing coming out of the Maryland game I think most Oregon fans should want to see. It is the ability to go from, hey, Oregon had a 12 penalty game to can you have something closer to what they did against Michigan, where they had 2 penalties for 10 yards, which is astonishingly good. You can't do that every week. It's just not possible. But can you keep it to 5 penalties or fewer? Or can you keep it at least under 50 penalty yards? This Wisconsin offense this year in big games hasn't been good. When they have faced high quality opponents, when they face Alabama, their quarterback did get hurt in that game, but they only had 10 points. And against Penn State, they only managed 13 points. So if you don't give them a helping hand, I don't know that against this Oregon defense, they're going to be able to consistently move the ball up and down the field. Now, as I've talked about this week, Braden Locke can make some throws. He can do some good things. He can also turn the football over. And I'd be pretty surprised if Oregon doesn't have at least 1 turnover in this game after forcing 3 last week against Maryland, who has a similar offense with the way they want to throw the football first and foremost. But I think Wisconsin's got a little bit more capable of a ground game. But first and foremost for Oregon's defense, I think they played well against Maryland last week if you take out the penalties. Get out of your own way. Don't give them free chances to go down the field and keep drives alive, because I think the penalties last week, it gave Maryland 6 or 7 first downs. It probably gave them around 10 points that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And I think that I'd love to see Oregon going into the bye week deliver a single-digit defensive performance on the road. They're very capable of that. I don't know that they'll clean up everything in 1 week's time, but I think if you take away the penalties, Oregon's defense will be in a pretty good spot. Second key to the game is win the rushing battle. This is a two-way key here. Yes, Wisconsin wants to throw the football more, but when they had success in that 3-game stretch against Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern, they ran the ball really well. They had a 300-yard rushing game. They were over 200 yards in those contests. Like they did a really good job of running the football. So I think that's secondary to Oregon being able to run the football here, because if they're able to go down the field, like this offense as a whole for Oregon against any opponent, when they can run the football, it becomes really dangerous. Because if you have to bring an extra safety down into the box and leave your corners one-on-one on the outside. Now, Wisconsin's got an NFL caliber cornerback out there, but I still like Oregon's receiving core, and I expect those things that weren't quite clicking the passing game to get cleaned up a little bit now that it's their second full week, but almost third game without Tez Johnson playing out there. I think for Oregon, the ability to run the football just to keep that Wisconsin defense honest so they can't just sit on the pass and lean into their strengths, I think that'll be really, really beneficial here. So when Wisconsin's offense has been at its best, they've had a good running game to go with throwing the football with Braden Locke. But for Oregon's offense to be fully explosive and dynamic and take some play action shots down the field, there has to be an actual threat of running the ball. So running it particularly early in the game, I think is really important to kind of set the tone and make the defense think, okay, I know we're really good against the pass. Do we need to just leave our corners on islands out there? And I trust Evan Stewart against anybody. I'll trust Evan Stewart again. He's not going to win every single matchup, but he's going to win a pretty good amount of them. And you got T. Ferg and Trayshawn Holden's there, and Justice Lowe, of course, has done some really, really nice things in the last few weeks. So I think for Oregon, winning the rushing battle and outrunning Wisconsin, particularly early in the game, I think can be a tone setter. And then finally, I've had this key a couple times, and I think Oregon's done a solid job this year, knock on wood, of avoiding this when I brought it up, but avoid the mistakes on special teams. So Camp Randall is a fantastic environment. My impression or memory that flashes to mind anytime I think of Camp Randall was post-COVID, when we finally were back to normal with college football fans being in the stands. One of my favorite college football moments watching on TV, because it was so frustrating and I of course understood why it was the case, but watching the fans and watching games without fans in the stands, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. It was missing something. And Wisconsin played, I forget who it was, but they played a game on Fox, and instead of going to commercial break, they stayed on the shot while Wisconsin's fans did jump around, which is, some Oregon fans might know, it's their version of shout. It's what they do at the end of the third quarter going to the fourth. And it was fantastic. And we've been waiting for so long, it felt like, to get the fans back, and we finally had them. And watching that spectacle take place and knowing, hey, we can have these moments again was the most relieving and exciting feeling as a college football fan. And that's what I think of every time I think of Camp Randall. So when you've got a crowd like that certainly is going to get up for the number one team in the country and show up. Like, Wisconsin's a decent team. It's not as if their season's completely in the dumps. You know, they're fighting for bowl eligibility, and it's just Luke Fickell's second year, but they've got a chance, and they're 14.5-point dogs. Bigger underdogs have won outright this year. Kentucky beat Ole Miss, Vanderbilt beat Alabama, Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame. Like, those things have happened. And so I don't think that's going to happen here, but the crowd's going to be there. And nothing gets a crowd going more like a special teams blunder. So stay away from those things. Don't fumble a punt return or a kick return. Just catch the ball. Just get it to the offense. Take a touchback. That's okay. Don't allow a blocked field goal, block punt, punt return. Like, those moments can really spark a crowd to life, even if Oregon has a lead. Let's say Oregon jumps out to a 10-0 lead. You know what Wisconsin will be looking for? They'll be looking for an explosive play. They'll be looking for something to change the game and to get the crowd back into it. And special teams can be that. And I think the last time I had this highlighted as a key was Ohio State, and Oregon botched an extra point. Now, thankfully, Oregon was at home, but still got a little closer. That Oregon won by just 1 point and came up empty after scoring a touchdown twice in that game. So I think those three things are going to help Oregon get a big win. And again, as I mentioned on yesterday's show, these are keys to Oregon winning by 20 to 28 or 30 points, not just winning the game outright. They could do none of these things, still find a way to win the football game. It'll just be uncomfortable, shall we say, more so than Oregon fans would like it to be. So clean up the penalties, win the rushing battle, offense, defense, got to be good in the ground game there, and avoid special teams mistakes. You do those things, I think Oregon goes out and wins pretty comfortably. If they start forcing turnovers, this is my honorable mention key to the game. If they force turnovers of Wisconsin's just going to struggle to move the football. That's just how their offense has been this year when Braden Locke has turned it over. Like most teams, it's really hard to score points. So my prediction is Oregon 31, Oregon 34. 34, and my score predictions for Oregon this year have been really, really good. Against the spread, not quite as good this year, but I think Oregon wins. I think Oregon covers 34-17. I don't know exactly how it's going to look. I don't know if Oregon's going to run the ball a ton, if they'll run it some, as they kind of have in the past, and lean on Dylan Gabriel. Like, I don't know exactly how it's going to look. I just have the sense that with the bye week looming, and after the way Oregon played against Maryland last week, this is a game where Oregon comes out and plays really well. I can see them winning by more than that. I can see them winning by less than that. But I think Oregon wins. I think Oregon covers 34-17. And I think if they hit 175 or more on the ground, especially if they get to that 200 mark, if they're in the 200, 220 range, running the football this week with Jordan James and Noah Whittington, maybe sprinkle in a bit of Dylan Gabriel as well, then I think this game could really get away from Wisconsin. I think the ceiling on the score this week is kind of in that 49 to 10 sort of range. I think the floor, I think Oregon could lose a game. I've seen way crazier upsets happen, but I think Oregon's going to be able to go in and roll the Badgers. 34-17, I'm taking the Ducks.